CIS people, if you had to boil it down to a topic, what is Splendid Little War about, big picture wise?
The main reason for the war was economic.
Boom, good job. So the primary cause of the war was economics. So big picture wise, the economy caused the war. Big idea. Okay, now I would say that Splendid Little War has two distinct parts. Okay, so what are two ways in which the economy caused the Spanish-American War? Mr. Abbott?
Overseas markets and financial problems in the U.S.
So you have mentioned things that would appear down here as like evidence. Okay, there's one reason, there are two reasons in which the economy caused the war. One kind of has to do with the second thing you said. What? The what?
The populist.
The populist movement, bingo, which was a reaction to what? Again, your ability to find the right information but not know what you're talking about, Ms. Hanson, continues to amaze me. The populist movement came about due to what?
The psychic crisis.
Now I think you're talking about the Hofstadter article. The Great Depression. Yep. So we were in a depression. And war was seen as a way to get out of the depression, right? So economically, one way in which the war came about, according to LeFeber, was that the depression was happening and the war was a way to get us out of it. What was the other way in which the economy or an economic reason thrust us towards the Spanish-American War?
Enough overseas trade.
Well, getting us a war gives us overseas trade, which helps us get out of a depression. The LeFeber talked about chains of influence, right? Now, chains of colliding to create some sort of benefit. One of those chains was the economic depression. There was another one. He spends probably the last third of the article talking about how it works out. Here's my clue.
Connecting.
Connecting who?
Oh, 1 second.
Ah, yes. So the marriage of business and political interests, or business and government. Okay, so the economic reasons were the cause of the Spanish-American War. One way economic reasons were the cause of the war were the depression. That led us to war. And then the marriage of business and political entities led us into war. Okay, now, background information. Somebody give me some context about this depression. What was happening as a result of the depression? Somebody used a P word earlier. The populist movement. So the depression, life sucked, right? So context is that life sucks. Everyone's poor. And because everyone's poor, there's a populist movement. What does populist mean? Do you know? I'm not going to ask you to guess. Do you know what populism means or not?
No.
Populism means generally, kind of like mob in a way. A bunch of people want some stuff, and so the things that they want become their movement. So a populist movement would be like the demands of a large group of people. So the populist movement is also defined by LeFeber as the symptom of something. What is that thing? Populism, again, we're demanding stuff. There's a depression going on. What are people demanding? Money for a non-depression to be happening. Okay, what were the two ways in which we could get out of this depression with money?
War.
One way was to go to war. The other way was to do what? How else could you distribute wealth? You could go to war, find some new wealth, or you could. What were you going to say, Danny? So-
Government.
Don't worry about right.
Making a change to economics.
Yes, making a change. So you can go out and find new money, or we can take the money that we currently have and dispense it in a different way. Okay, so so depression means everyone's poor, life sucks. This populist movement is coming up, and so people are like, okay, we can get rid of this populist movement by either going to war or we can change the economic system. It's important that right now in your notes you understand that this serves as context for this thing right here. Okay, so the Depression led us to war. Okay, tell us more about the Depression. People were poor, life sucked. The populist movement came about. It was a symptom of a revolution. We can stop the revolution either by going to war or by changing the economic system. Now, what did people choose to do? Obviously, they chose to go to war. Okay, so give me some evidence for how the Depression led to war and how war was able to fix depression. So how does an economic depression compel us to go to war? Mr. Abbott.
Because of the war, then factories are producing things to create weapons for the soldiers. Soldiers are being hired to fight. Kind of gets everything moving.
Absolutely. So a wartime economy sprouts up, right? So if you're going to war, you got soldiers getting paid. You have factories. They have new work orders. The government is buying things from them. So you got people working in factories, people working as soldiers. So employment goes up. So that is a way in which war fixes the depression, right? How else does the depression lead to war, or does war fix the depression? How else does war give us money?
From other countries,
What do you mean by that?
overseas markets.
Bingo. Okay. So somebody tell me about how specifically the Spanish-American War gave us increased access to overseas markets. Somebody besides Abbott and Hanson. You guys have been doing a lot of heavy lifting.
And Brooke Mitchell.
Okay, yeah, all right. Abbott, Hanson, and Brooke. Abbott, don't tell Gus what to say. Okay, Gus.
I have no idea. He hasn't done what he said.
Okay. How does the Spanish-American War give us access to overseas markets?
Because if we conquer Cuba, then we have new land there, close to it.
All right, so markets. So we would certainly have a more favorable market in Cuba. Absolutely. So you beat Spain, you kick the Spanish out of Cuba. Now America becomes the primary trading partner of Cuba, and we have more people to buy our stuff. What other market would we have access to if we were able to get this whole Spanish-American War figured out? China. Okay. Now, how does war with Spain give us access to a Chinese market?
Because they were
Sphere of we got a war with Spain and Cuba. How is that giving us a sphere of influence in China?
because they're there.
China is not in Cuba.
Well, they're in Spain.
Also no. It's only mentioned in there briefly, but
Because of the Philippines. Because the Spanish have control of the Philippines, so the Spanish American War balanced with Cuba and the Philippines. And then from there we get to China.
So if we beat Spain and Cuba, we have leverage to get more Spanish things under our umbrella.
Yeah, and then we'll just keep going.
Okay, so this gives us, so taking Spanish properties in the Pacific, it gives us more access towards Cuba. Also, they mention a canal that is important for trade. That you want to make note of that. If we beat Spain in Cuba, we now have access to that canal. This just makes it easier to ship things off towards China and also to receive shipments from China. Okay, and it's important. So analysis-wise, all of this stuff, access to markets and greater unemployment, gives us more money. More money helps cure the depression. And the end of the depression means that we don't have to worry about revolution anymore. You got it? So this is one paragraph that you write. So this is the first thing that you're summarizing. So how does the depression create war? Well, we know if we're doing an inductive paragraph, what are we moving? This topic sentence down to the bottom, right? So we're starting with what? Context. So what's the important context to talk about? The depression. People are poor. There's a populist movement sprouting up. The populist movement is a symptom of revolution. Two ways to solve the revolution: go to war, seek new markets. Seek new markets to get money in there, or change the economic system. Now we need to move on to evidence. So give me evidence for how this depression caused war, and war was able to fix the depression. Well, depression caused war because when there is war happening, evidence, soldiers are getting hired, factories are building stuff, employment goes up, currency goes up. How else does war get us out of the depression? Winning a war gives you access to foreign markets. Having access to more markets generates more money. If we beat Cuba, here's evidence. Beating Cuba gives us access to the Cuban market and the Asian market because of the canal and Spanish-controlled territories. So this is the way in which you go about, kind of line by line, creating an inductive paragraph for how the economy caused war, depression, economic reason caused war. Make sense?
Yes.
Okay, now let's cruise on over to business and political interests. Okay, so what's relevant context or background information for business and political marriage? What does that mean? If business interest and political interest have a partnership, that means what? They are doing things that, what?
They work together.
They work together. They're doing things that benefit each other, right? Business is going to do stuff that benefits the political class. The political class is going to do stuff that benefits the business class. So you'd want to be able to explain that partnership. Now, why, and this would be in context, why does this relationship exist according to LeFeber? Why did the business community and the political community partner up? What? I mean, we just talked, he gets more specific right away when he starts writing about this business. This is business. I'm joking. Little LeFeber joke. Why does the business community need to seek the help of the government or the political community? Why do they want a partnership? Major Gene.
They don't have any leverage when they go to trade.
Bingo. So they need this partnership in order to compete in foreign markets, in trade. Context. Okay, so this business and political partnership means that they have a partnership, they're working together, they're making interest in the best interest of each other. The business needs the political class in order to compete overseas. Now you could give me additional context. Why does the business community need the political community in order to compete in overseas markets? Abbott.
Maybe because the politicals could create like treaties and say, let's send people here, which would then help the businesses because they don't open up more to those overseas markets.
That is how it would work out. Yes. LeFeber mentioned something very specific. Everything that I'm asking you is a different way of asking you one of the questions that you answered last week. And so what is the reason that the business community needed the political community in order to compete in overseas markets?
Because like other countries were like corrupt-ish, and they're
Are you saying that we are becoming corrupt by doing this?
no, but we couldn't keep up with other countries.
Ah, there we go. Okay. Other countries had this partnership where the political was benefiting the business, and we didn't. And so in order for us to be able to get into those markets, we needed to have this partnership. And he brings up an example from Russia in there. So that would be context. Okay, now we need to get to evidence. Okay, what are specific things that happen that demonstrate how the business and political partnership causes war? What evidence does he use? Well, the last third of the paper is all about what specific conflict. It's in the title. Spanish-American War. Okay, so how is the Spanish-American War evidence of business and political partnership?
Because they needed to go to
Who is the they?
the business. I don't know. America.
America what? Amen, brother. Why was the Cuban Revolution a potential problem for the business community?
For that rest of the assets they already had.
They had a bunch of assets, right? So again, we're talking about evidence that demonstrates this process. So evidence would come in the form of, stop bending over right now. So the business community had significant assets invested in Cuba, right? So if there's a revolution that's happening, the Cuban people are standing up and trying to kick the Spanish out, what potentially could happen to those assets? They could go away, right? It's uncertainty for the business community. Okay, so if they have assets in Cuba and those assets are threatened by a revolution, then the business community is going to want to seek out the government in order to solve this problem. Why does the business community need government here? Can the business community get those assets back on their own? No. Without the government working with them, they're out there. Okay, so we need the government, that GOVT, we need the government to help secure those assets. Now, how does the government go about securing those assets? Why does the government choose to go to war? At first, McKinley was like, let's not go to war for an imperial reason and an economic reason. What was the imperial reason McKinley did not want to go to war? So this would be kind of like the government not working with business.
They didn't want the colonial empire.
Yeah, didn't want all the problems that conquering Cuba would bring in. There was also an economic reason given for why the government wasn't too keen on war. So yeah, those assets are at risk, but what else is happening economically? A war could endanger what? Yeah, business has been getting a little better, right? Okay, so going to war, even though there is this wartime economy, might jeopardize our stabilizing economy. But then all of a sudden, the economic reason goes away. Because big business decides what? How does big business feel about this war?
Good.
What?
Good.
Good. Big business says war is good. Why would big business want war? Well, who do you think gets to do all of this stuff over here in our wartime economy? Is it a mom and pop shop? Would it be the treadmill? RIP? No. It would be what? Target, Phillips Medisize, whatever, the big, huge factories. Okay, so big business recognizes that they're going to profit off this. Also, did the treadmill have assets invested in Cuba? No. But who does probably have assets invested in Cuba? Multinational corporations, the big businesses. Okay, so big business says, yeah, war is okay. So then the government goes to war. War benefits, so the government chooses to go to war because it's in the best interest of business. And then since business is an economic entity, that is another reason for how the economy led to war, or economic reasons led to war. Does that make sense?
Wait, what's the last sentence?
Just you can watch the video. It'll be posted online.
You know.
No. Big business decided that war was a good thing because big business and government were partnered together. Therefore, the government decides that war is a good thing once they have the business community's background. Going to war helps out these businesses, and helping out the businesses is why we would want war. So it's kind of walking us through that chain of events. So when you're going to write this second body paragraph, so this is body paragraph, or this is paragraph 1, this is paragraph 2, just start off. Explain the context, what's going on with the business and political partnership, and then provide evidence of how the business community and the political community had a partnership that benefited things economically and was dependent on war. And we just walk through all that sort of stuff. So those are your 2 body paragraphs. CIS people, you have any questions?
No.
This is it. These are your paragraphs. So you need to arrange these in an inductive way. For tomorrow, you can start writing one of these bad boys and or reading your Hofstadler. AP Lang people. How much time do we have? Perfect. Okay. AP Lang folks. Raise your hand so I know where you are. 1, 2, so it's like this half of the room. Great. Okay, so we read Silent Spring. What is generally the main point of Silent Spring? It's the second time in a row you just repeated the title, Mr. Linden. You can look at the title for clues. You can't just say titles.
What's it about?
Yeah, what's the big topic of Silent Spring?
Well, chemicals, radiation, and how it's affecting us.
How is it affecting us?
Negatively.
So chemicals are negatively affecting, and it's not necessarily
Us
just
and
us.
nature.
Nature. Negatively affecting nature. All right. Just like the CIS land, there are kind of 2 main ways in which this is happening. So what does she spend the first, 5 pages talking about? How are chemicals negatively affecting nature? That would be down here in our evidence land. So pesticides and insects. Miss Wood?
How they're causing more problems than good. So I mean, they're killing insects and then they're making them more common. So she's going through a bunch of different issues, basically.
Well, pesticides kill insects, and then what happens?
The next ones adapt, so they have to make stronger chemicals.
And so then we got stronger chemicals, and then what happens?
and then it's a cycle.
It's a cycle,
It's a-
never-ending spiral, right?
Yeah.
And that's down here in our evidence. What else is going on for chemicals killing nature? And in what way does this pollution happen when it comes to chemicals? Think back to how chemicals and radiation are similar to each other.
Spraying.
Spring. Quit taking lessons from Gus. Silent. Spring. Spring silence. Silent spring. What?
You don't like realize it, so it's too late.
Oh, you do notice it. I mean, nuclear bomb goes off, man. Notice it.
It's too late. Yeah.
You notice.
Well, it's in the air.
Once it's in the air, it's too late.
What do you mean by it's too late?
It can't.
Irreversible.
Irreversible. Yeah, absolutely. So there's an irreversible change. Okay, so chemicals are changing nature. It's in a bad way because there is an irreversible change happening. Right? One ways in which chemicals give us an irreversible change is this spiral that we just talked about. We are creating these superbugs, right? Through the use of pesticides and insects coming back. How else do we have irreversible changes through the use of chemicals?
It's in your body. Eat food and drink water.
Absolutely. So it gets in the food chain, right? Things eat those insects. Things eat those things that ate insects, and eventually we are consuming those things. Using a chemical on something just doesn't mean that chemical goes away. And like you said as well, it gets in the water table. Great. How else does the use of chemicals cause an irreversible change to nature? Ms. Wood?
It kills things it's not supposed to.
Indiscriminate killing. Yep. So we use it to kill those bugs, also killing a bunch of other stuff in there.
Yeah.
And then there's the mention of like single-use crops. Right? How does that give us this kind of like change that we're not looking for?
Because it's one type all planted in one spot,
Mm-hmm.
and that makes it easier for there to be population problems with certain bugs.
Absolutely.
And it's not how it naturally happens, so it messes it up.
Bingo. Okay, so these are things that you would mention as evidence in this paragraph, right? Chemicals are causing an irreversible change in nature. Or chemicals are ruining nature. One way in which that's happening is that there's an irreversible change. Here are examples of irreversible changes. What would we put in here for context? What would I want to walk about? Or walk about? What would I want to talk about? Ms. Wood?
How chemicals are used in like the agriculture stuff, and why maybe.
Yeah. So we're giving us background about how chemicals are used and how they go out there, and then we're giving examples of them providing putting forth irreversible change. Okay. Now the other thing, I'll give this to you because this one's a little tough. So our first point is that chemicals are causing irreversible change. Does she have a problem with the idea of insect control?
No.
100%. Are there circumstances under which she says, yeah, we got to control this insect problem?
Yeah.
Yes. What are those circumstances?
The spreading of the disease and the overpopulation.
So context. So when there's overpopulation and there's disease going all over the
Yeah.
place,
Like invasive species.
Yeah. we need to think about how we're going to take care of these insects. Okay? But what?
Not using chemicals.
What is her problem with the way in which we're using chemicals?
Carelessly.
Yeah, people are using insects, or people, man, are careless with their chemical usage. Okay, so she Context, yeah. Chemicals might need to be used. Insects need to be controlled from time to time, especially when these circumstances are presenting themselves. But what else can we point to for evidence about why chemical usage is careless?
Anyone has the option to use it.
It's almost an automatic part of the farm community, right? Somebody talk to me about diversity. Or talk to me about how nature creates balance.
Well, I mean, everything's made for a reason, it seems. So if there's too much of one thing and then another thing is going extinct, it's going to throw off the whole balance and cause problems.
Yeah, nature needs balance, or nature tries to create its own balance. By introducing chemicals, you are throwing a big old wrench into that balance. Can nature adapt quickly enough to respond to all these chemicals coming in? No. Okay, so we're throwing off nature's balance, and the way in which we go about pursuing our single cropland is another reason why life sucks. Does that make sense? So again, same thing as CIS jams. This is paragraph 1. This is paragraph 2. Paragraph 1 should start talking about how chemicals cause an irreversible change in nature. Maybe you talk about how, like, compare chemicals to radiation, and then you give us this evidence and explain how evident chemicals are changing nature, and that's a bad thing. Second paragraph, people are careless with their chemical usage. Context, insects do need to be controlled, but we're controlling them in a way that is overabundant. Anyone has access to these environment changing chemicals. And we're ruining the balance that exists in nature without having any idea of what's going to happen kind of down the road. So those become your 2 inductive paragraphs, AP Lang people. Does that make sense?
Yes.
What questions do you have? Ms. Wood?
What are these two?
So you want to try to wrap up these 2 paragraphs by Friday-ish.
Okay.
If you don't get them done on Friday, you want them done for Monday. And then Monday, Tuesday-ish next week, you're going to want to write your land ethic paragraphs, and we'll talk about those a little bit later. So with that, I think we got done right on time. Nice work, me. Master's degree.
Good job, man.
Yep. Crushed it. I'll post this video online, so if you forgot something,